What we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. When the tongues of flame are enfolded into the crowned knot of fire, and the fire and the rose are one.
You walk anywhere in a cassock and you're getting looks because they don't know who you are, what you are, if you're safe or not. Especially as an Orthodox priest in a small southern town in Texas, you feel that it's palpable when people look at you. It's a tension in my life. There's times I don't wear it because I just don't want to be looked at, if I'm going to go to the post office or whatever. But there's plenty of times where I do wear it because I do want to be looked at.
That's the best live show I've ever seen.
I was shocked just how untamed and wild that band was.
I feel like Luxury, did they break up?
I remember thinking, like, how does such a great band come from such a small place?
Art should be disruptive, right?
Wow, that is louder and noisier and harder than most of what I listen to, but oh, wow.
No one should be singing this prettily over guitars that are lunging at me this way.
And he would stare people down in the crowd and he'd come to me, and I'm like, I know this guy though. But you're looking through me, man. It's like, this is ridiculous.
Why didn't Luxury make it? Did the Christians kill him?
At the time, grunge had come. There weren't any bands, either in Atlanta or in Athens, who wanted to come across like they cared too much about their presentation. I remember Lee being dressed in this suit with his hair all perfect, like he'd spent a good bit of time in the mirror. I remember being initially repelled by that. I couldn't understand how a rock band was going to play in that scene with that. A really self-consumed lead singer. Within about 10 to 20 seconds, even Lee's presentation made total sense. It was just explosive and stunning.
You could always pick out the Luxury fans by the way that they dressed in this, like, early 60s kind of style. I didn't see that in any other band at the time.
Because none of us had girls at our shows. It's a bunch of sweaty, heavier, hardcore guys in basketball jerseys. And then you hear about Luxury shows and there's like girls, pretty girls. It was intimidating.
It lets you know who the sensitive guys were and who weren't, if they would dress up with you and go to a luxury show. I think it was a way to spot other people who got it, maybe.
Everything from the way the records looked, to the name itself, to the songs, you're like, dude, I am not going there. None of them girls are ever gonna talk to me, you know?
I've been mildly obsessed with luxury since I was 14, so they could have just got on stage and crapped all over their instruments and then walked off, and I'd probably been like, luxury does what luxury wants.
Who is this dude and what is he doing?
A lot of eye contact. You weren't just watching a band, all of a sudden someone was looking at you. It made you feel uncomfortable. And you're like, don't sing to me. Are you singing to me? You could see guys be like, okay. I didn't feel like it was because he wanted to be your friend. I think it felt more like he deserved to be heard and you needed to shut up and listen.
Seeing Lee like live, I was like, that's the kind of frontman that I want to be. Shh, be quiet. I never think that Lee really like knows like what his reach has been.
Everybody loved to watch Glenn play drums. There's a lot of things you're like, what is he? You couldn't tell what he was doing.
He's an animal.
The thing that sticks in my mind about watching Jamie play guitar is the blood.
Going on after they played was disheartening. They just did something completely punk in spirit, and Lee was challenging on levels of intellect and emotion, and we're just kind of a big dumb rock band. That's what it felt like.
And I thought, God, I can't believe these guys are from Georgia, you know?
Going to Toccoa Falls was definitely a culture shock because it was a very controlled, moralistic Christian culture. When I was exposed to the punk scene, it was a full integrated subculture. What I found in punk rock was people believed in something wholeheartedly and had the zeal to do it. And they weren't living two different lives, you know, like I saw in some of the Christian subculture. I went up to Toccoa Falls for a preview weekend my senior year in high school, and I was desperate to find, you know, are there any like-minded people here? You know, so I'm scanning the cafeteria for band shirts or Doc Martens or, you know, anything. And I couldn't find anybody. And then this guy said, oh, you need to meet Glenn and Jamie. I mean, you'd like them. So I knocked on their door later on that night. I met Jamie and Lee was there. Glenn came by later and we talked for hours. I can distinctly remember them saying, if you're interested in art and music, you don't want to come here. You know, they were trying to talk me out of coming, but there'd be some people here that are like-minded and their musical tastes are different, but anything that's non-mainstream was good enough for me. Went there the next year. I went to see them practice, and I'm watching Glenn play, and as a bass player, I said, I'm going to play with that drummer.
I was raised mostly in southeastern Michigan. I lived in Ida, Michigan, Temperance, Michigan, Bedford, Michigan, Toledo, Ohio, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. By the time I graduated, I went to 12 different schools.
While the moving around.
Man, you could do a documentary on just that. My mom remarried when I was about 4. My stepfather sold costume jewelry, also known as junk jewelry. My mom brought me home the first Queen album and Alice Cooper, $1 Billion Babies. She would see like a Kiss display at a record store and ask if when they were done with it, if she could have it. When I was 7, I got my first set of drums. Shortly thereafter, the decision was made to move into an RV and travel with the carnival. Up to that point, everything in my life was strange. Then it gets weirder because it gets darker, and I don't know that I really want to go there.
I can remember borrowing my dad's transistor radio and one little earbud, and I would go lay in bed at night and listen to some Toledo, Ohio radio station. And I remember asking my dad, is it okay if I like that? And he didn't really respond. And years later, he would regret that he didn't respond to that at that moment. I used all the money I had left from the gifts I'd been given from high school graduation to buy a Fender Squier. And I taught myself how to go as quickly as I could from chord to chord. I came to college and Glenn Black was already there and he was playing with another guy. And so they brought me on and we played for about a year, and that really got me to the point where I understood how to be in a band. Our father was an evangelical pastor, so we moved around a lot.
Being younger, you don't really know why you're moving. It was kind of just what we always knew. I was born in South Carolina, I lived in Georgia, and Alabama, and Florida, Ohio, Michigan. No real sense of this is where I'm from and this is my home. I had a very one-dimensional relationship with everybody. I really began to love music in high school. And so it became a part of my identity, part of who I was, became a thing.
So I would come home from my freshman break, and he had Depeche Mode pictures all over the walls. The next time it was all Smiths. He had developed his own taste. I knew he'd be joining us at Toccoa Falls College in 1990.
When I met Lee, he was just, Jamie's younger brother who thought he was Morrissey.
And so I had the idea that he would come in, and I would get him to play guitar, and then I would sing.
He had never played anything.
But he came in and immediately ended up becoming the singer, much to my own surprise and frustration, because I really wanted to be the singer.
Like, I was just hanging around. For whatever reason, I had come to college with a pair of maracas and a tambourine. I couldn't sing at all.
But there was a lot of style there, and there was a lot of panache. That took a while to come out. Once it came out, it was unstoppable. We played with a guy named Todd Monroe who played drums for us, and then eventually Glenn came on.
The first time I remember seeing them, it was a talent contest. Lee got up there, and he was just like going for it.
I think I realized at that point, yeah, I think he's gonna manage just fine.
I'd never been in a band that had a frontman.
I didn't have enough wherewithal to be frightened of doing it, and I could just kind of get up there and make a fool of myself, which is certainly what I did.
He was more of the token front man that couldn't really sing. Sorry, honey. He's not, now he's angry.
And singing was incidental. It was more of just delivery and attitude.
He picked up the mic and he was in control. I couldn't do that, I didn't have the moves. All I could do was be what I was, which was kind of a blunt object.
I loved the performance of it, connecting with people and watch them laugh at you.
He had charisma, even then, even if it was just like a little bit, I could sense it. I remember thinking, crap, I need to be in a band with Lee. This is the craziest thing, but I was like, Lord, I need to be in that band. I don't even remember his vocals.
Glenn came on and the deal was sealed.
So that first year, we were called The Shroud.
First time I ever heard them, I was walking on campus. I heard this screeching, horrific noise, and I thought, what's going on down there? And they were practicing, and I remember thinking, these guys are terrible.
We were just trying to get shows in the clubs in Atlanta and Athens.
We would just play wherever we could. Skate parks and restaurants and libraries, bookstores.
I mean, there were so many shows where there were like 4 people there. Lee's jumping up on the speakers. Jamie's busted his fingers open again, and he's yelling. There's like no one in the room. And Katie and I would just sit in the back of the room, and we're just like, oh, what are we doing? That's what I remember the most, are the shows that nobody showed up.
Toccoa Falls College was cloistered away from the town of Toccoa. And this little bubble, it just seemed like these two worlds never came together. And you'd go into town and you'd see all the teenagers just hanging out in the parking lot, getting drunk on a Friday night. And we just thought, how cool would it be to have some, local venue? And we found this place. I think we got it for like $150 a month. So then we started having shows there. The kids from the college, many of them came from kind of a sheltered environment.
They were only allowed to listen to quote-unquote Christian music.
Just exposing them to a new kind of music. And then I think the kids in the town. I mean, it was kind of rural Northeast Georgia, so I think a lot of those kids had never been exposed to a lot of non-mainstream bands and that you could do this in your town.
I think that there was like this cultural thing where you had these two audiences, and people who were only listening to Christian music were rather shocked and appalled by what was happening. And some people just thought it was amazing.
There's been a lot of talk around Toccoa about a new club called The Dish.
This is my first night here to hear them, but they are just extraordinary.
His mannerisms were extremely controversial for a Christian setting. The subtle things that he was doing, I felt like he was taking the piss out of a lot of people. I was like, this is good.
Lee always, to me, gave off this ambiguous sexuality.
He's like very handsome, so there's like a disarming thing about that. He will interweave strange, effeminate things that seem like they are purely to cause people to question what they feel about things, you know? It's just awesome. They're a great live band. Yeah. Like, they kill everybody. The hair behind the drum kit, and Lee had the high and tight before anybody had the high and tight, and it just was like rocking it.
Back in the early days, themes started to emerge in the lyrics, which would become important. Like the song Touch, for example, seemed to be addressing some of these issues.
It was not sexual at all. And it never occurred to me that it could be interpreted that way.
So what was the lyric?
I'm going to touch him. It could be interpreted a certain way. It basically is about beating someone up. I remember reading someone reviewing it and saying it's about reaching out and touching God. Made me guffaw because it was just absolutely not what it was.
It was the second year that things really started clicking.
We were performing quite a bit and we were practicing a lot. We became a much more serious band, and we blocked out a big piece of time to where we would seriously work on the songs.
I will sing these words.
This weird mix of styles is coming together to become its own thing.
We're all coming from very different places and different ideas, but it totally worked.
You know, I just wonder if being in a Christian school and you're so desperate to find like-minded people, you're willing to play with people that maybe you wouldn't. I wouldn't have joined Luxury in high school. Up until that point, I always felt like I wanted to be a DC Nation of Ulysses type band. Lee wanted to be in an edgy Smiths band. You know, Jamie wanted to be The Edge, or Glenn wanted to be Keith Moon. I felt like when we became Luxury and changed the name, I think we just all bought into a common vision. And so at that point, I just said, okay, I'm willing to do whatever it is we're doing here. And that's when we all decided, like, we're gonna do that. We're gonna try this.
It's not the best name. It looks much better when you read it than to say it. Fugazi sounds wonderful to say, and it looks great when you write it down. It was kind of ironic because we were all dirt poor, and none of us had any hopes of living luxurious lives.
They lived in a trailer park in Toccoa.
The floors were caving in, no air conditioning. We were all working together, practicing twice a week.
I worked with them on construction sites. Chris and I painted houses. We built homes. They work hard. They have a blue-collar, punk rock ethic.
You know, that's when things really started opening for us in terms of getting better shows.
Well, we just want to be the biggest band in the world, just because we have a lot to say and there are a lot of people that need to listen.
We met the guys from this band called The Prayer Chain, who had gotten very big in that Christian alternative music scene.
They came to Toccoa and played a show. They were telling us that we should go to Cornerstone, a huge Christian festival, just to get our name out.
Like, if you went there, it would be difficult to discern that it was a Christian festival.
Rock bands, punk bands, not easy listening.
It was about as cool a thing as that kind of thing could ever be, which was sometimes kind of cool.
Something happened Part of it was the idea that rock music could be dangerous. The concerns were often about sexual content or drug references, but the scariest stuff was always the Satanism. This conservative wave that swept the country in that Reagan era, they were terrified that this was the doorway into hell, almost literally. And Christian rock was the response to that. I think it was a real product of its time. Tipper Gore, Al Gore's wife, wanted to create the Parents Music Resource Center. They were concerned with lyrical content, with album covers, and we wound up with a rating system and labels.
The Christian market really started coming into its own in the 90s.
Complete with its own stores, record labels. Its goal is to make money just like any other, but it benefits from that slot in the store that says Christian.
Back in the 90s, if you had any sort of faith and you knew other people in that scene, that was sort of expected that that's the route that you would go.
We didn't see ourselves as a Christian band.
We would just play wherever we could.
The idealism is that you'll play your music for anybody, and you're comfortable talking to Christians, but you're equally comfortable in a club or a bar. If you get traction with a Christian audience, then that just kind of reinvests in itself. Your bookings look much more like a Christian band, a band that intends to play Christian venues. These things become information that you didn't mean for them to become. It's important to remember that in the 1980s, Christian rock sounded very second-rate. So in the 90s, most of the effort was around getting Christians to try to sound just a little cooler.
That was before Sufjan Stevens and before Pedro the Lion had left Tooth and Nail.
The thing that changed is, I think, when Tooth and Nail Records came out.
Their whole thing was making cool records by Christian artists that weren't mainstream Christian music.
They were edgier, they were willing to take some more risks.
Tooth and Nail Records never started off to be an exclusive Christian label. You will never find a print ad or anything that says this is Christian, though a lot of the records, not all, were sold in Christian bookstores.
And Christian music as an industry drafted off of Christian books, and it used the same distribution systems. The mechanics of it were not set up to parallel any other kind of music.
When they left, my advice for them was, whatever you do, don't sign with a Christian label.
So we got out to Cornerstone. There were huge stages where the main bands played, and then there were the impromptu stages for bands that no one had ever heard of. You got up there as quickly as you could to sign up for a time slot to play.
Brandon from Tooth and Nail came by a few times. We said, you know, I'm gonna come see you guys play. We got there on a Thursday, and by Saturday, we still had not gotten a slot. So it was the last day.
Things were looking pretty bleak. Then a slot came open, and we nabbed it. There was another band that played, and there were literally like 4 people watching them. We get up there, we start playing, and people just start flocking to the stage. We killed, because that's what we do.
I'm like, oh, these guys are kind of like the Smiths, you know, but really wasn't. The drummer's going off. It's like he's in Led Zeppelin or something. You know, one of the guitar players seemed like he was in Fugazi or Minor Threat, and he played like that. And they played real heavy live. You know, it was punk rock, man. Then there was Lee, and Lee was one of the main reasons why I wanted to work with the band. He had a kind of sassy, cocky way about him that I thought was amazing. I was really into it.
Immediately, you know, Brandon came up to us after we played, and he wanted to sit down with us then and there.
Offers us a deal on the spot.
When you're kids in a band and you get an offer from any label, you're going to be stoked. It's hard to say no.
2 of the guys from the prayer chain come up behind us. Are you sure you really want to do this? I think that they saw us as having the potential to do more.
They did not seem like a Christian band at all. Truth is that's all any of us wanted at the time, to not be taken as a Christian band. I totally thought they were the ones that could be the band that broke out of the Christian music market.
Definitely didn't sound like anything else I had on my label.
I was anxious to go on to become a full-time musician, to be able to make a living, not working for minimum wage.
The way that the band described it was, no, this seems like they're kind of like us, but it's a label.
We kind of felt like there was some sort of a connection there between where we were and the fact that Tooth and Nail wasn't your typical Christian label.
Difference being that they had bands that could be successful within the Christian realm.
I didn't want to be a Christian band on a Christian label.
I would assume they went into these things being promised that, sure, we're going to take care of you in the Christian market, but we're not just a Christian label. We can get you all this mainstream stuff, too. I don't think that turned out to be true in either case.
I think we were impatient.
So we went with it.
That definitely seemed like a terrible fit.
Tooth and Nail booked us at a place called Neverland Studio, which was run by Steve Hindalong and Chris Colbert.
I remember seeing Luxury for the first time at a festival, and I just was astounded.
You know, I'm a snob. I've seen a lot of bands, and I'd seen a lot of bands even at that time. No, they had a spark. There was certainly something there. My cheap description at the time going into it, the Smiths meets Fugazi. My goal was to make it sound nothing like the Smiths and a little bit like Fugazi. I want to kind of make it aggro just because the Christian market needed as much aggro as I could shove down their throats.
I remember telling Steve when he was about to record them, don't tune their guitars for them. Like, it's actually like a part of their sound that the two guitars are slightly out of tune with each other. I was afraid they were going to put out like a stock, polished pop punk rock. Like, I was afraid that was the treatment that was going to go on their first record. I was like, I hope that does not happen. It should feel as reckless. It felt dangerous. It felt like something was going to happen. That's what a rock show should feel like.
I didn't have a sense of how to sing until we recorded our first record with Steve Hindalong, and he said, hey, by the way, here's how you sing. This is what it means to be flat. This is what it means to be sharp.
It really helped him develop into a better singer.
I think I was able to get Lee confident in himself and uninhibited, and Lee is kind of like the wild card. You know, a guy that has to be, you want to navigate him, or you just want to let, you know, what do you do with this? He's sang beautifully. He's got such a sweet tone.
Well, here's my skin. Now where's yours? Now where's yours? Now where's yours?
We really loved Lee's voice.
The first record, Amazing and Thank You, we all loved it, and we were all influenced by it musically.
The first record sounds like Liquid to me. I really like that.
The music is, there's some mystery to it, and the lyrics just feed right into it.
I didn't know anything about Luxury. This magazine had a one-page ad. I heard it just immediately, fell in love with it.
So extreme in its own sound, and everything is so roughly elegant. Such things have always appealed to me. You can just
But it really was this strange combination of influences where the guitars were just clanging away and Lee almost operating in his own universe. And that's why I think it was so riveting to me, is because I couldn't draw a beat on it.
It's not American, it's not British, but it's certainly somewhere in between. I was really attracted to that. I mean, it's not just a good memory, but it's still important music to me. But I didn't understand what this band did on this label. They were so different.
They just happened to be signed to a label that signed Christian rock bands. I never thought there was anything about it that seemed relevant to what American Christianity was trying to shove down people's throat. It just seemed like a band doing great songs, loud.
Their first record came out, and it was sold in Christian bookstores. I think it bears noting that they're Christian bookstores. They're places to sell books.
We made a decision to put them in Christian bookstores because at that time, my whole philosophy was like, a Christian bookstore should just celebrate artists that are Christians creating art, but they don't have to necessarily have an evangelical message.
There was no way to classify it as Christian, other than that it was on a Christian label.
Yeah.
It was like nothing discernibly Christian about the record.
If you give thanks to God or whatever in the liner notes, that can at least keep you on the same page as, you know, the other bands that are being sold. We didn't do that. Why we didn't do that, I don't know. Maybe we would have sold more records. I don't think we ever made a point of making our faith or God a selling point.
Mostly we played, you know, venues, you know, clubs, not Christian things. And anytime we did, because we would occasionally, I mean, they just always felt so awkward.
Okay, I didn't listen to Christian music. The bands that were overt in their message about Jesus. I didn't write about those things. I never intended for our music to be about any of that.
There was a stigma for that band. They had that one line about looking down a boy's shirt on one of those records, and all of Christian rock world went apeshit. You're skeptical of anything that isn't just like what you know.
There wasn't anything else happening like that at that moment. Things were super masculine. There was discussion about that. You know, are they or aren't they?
Oh, people thought they were gay dudes. I mean, everybody thought, oh, Lee, that Lee guy's gay. The discussions about that song often involved giggling. It's like, there's no way those kids are gonna hear that song and not be like,
Notably, the one song they didn't print the lyrics for in the tooth and nail in the booklet that accompanied the record.
I think that was just a mistake on our part, and we didn't proofread it enough. We would not have taken lyrics out.
Someone tried to put the lyrics to the song, and they're all over the place. Still, I find look down a bore shows, because nature will let you down every time. It's beautiful.
If we were going to take lyrics out, we would have probably taken out Pink Revenge, Flaming Youth. I mean, there's a lot of songs on the album that we probably could have taken the lyrics out for.
Part of his audience was the sort of Christian audience that he had to sort of kick against.
Oh, if I say that, that'll be fun.
Probably Pink Revenge would be the most likely to get trouble.
Lyrically, it holds up great. It still feels current and compelling. I like the fact that it was addressing these kind of things in that market. They're all straight dudes, and I know that, but it's just like being a little bit femme in their delivery, I thought was great.
It's observational. Just bring it out there into the light and see what it looks like.
How perfect to toss that out into like the Christian underground and have kind of the mainstream maybe pick up on that and have people be scandalized. I would like a good controversy. Yeah. I loved it, actually.
If you're some Christian youth group kid, you've never seen anything like this. And even if you're not a Christian youth group kid, you haven't seen anything like this. What have you seen like it? What was like luxury?
There was a fluidity to the way that luxury wrote and sang about gender. You could have these loud guitars, but have this really pretty singing. Seemed to really underscore the tension of what the songs were about.
I mean, I would consider it a queer record, even though they're straight guys. But even more so, I would consider it just an outsider record.
I mean, it really, to us, seemed like nothing. Didn't they sing that one song, Never Be a Lady, Not Like Me? I'm like, you know, what is it with those lines?
You'll never be a lady, never be a lady, no, not like me, not like me,
It wasn't controversial. Christians tend to have this inability to take a joke.
He had a style and grace that everybody wants. He was a rock star. by definition.
Positioning himself lyrically as an object of desire was unique for his market and the Christian part of their audience especially, but it completely coincided with his stage persona.
I think if anything, among my friends, they wanted to get their hands on more of things like that. Music that they liked, an attitude they could kind of fall in with, and then also have it be a little bit racy without it being vulgar. Like, they were all in.
He had a repressed sexuality. Yeah, I think I would say that. That's how I'd read that music.
You have to define repressed. I mean, I was a married man, by that point. Sex has always been sort of a central theme with a lot of my songwriting. I wasn't embarrassed by it at all.
You weren't embarrassed for him, you were embarrassed for yourself. He's telling me everything that I need to know and that I do know, but that I can't admit.
You hear something as beautiful as this, and it's like, finally, there's somebody who's kind of singing in a way that I identify with.
We had CDs returned left and right. I mean, we'd sell a lot. They'd come back to the Christian bookstores because people didn't know what to do with the lyrics.
I think our music came out of that tension. So, when these Christian bookstores didn't want to sell our album, that means we're doing something right.
It means you're challenging people. I mean, I'm all for that. Art should be disruptive, right?
There are people of faith who are making art, and if you're making art, you are going to ask questions provocatively, and you're going to make people uncomfortable, or else you're not making art, you're making propaganda.
I don't think that Lee was the least bit conflicted about it. I just don't think it was on his radar, for whatever reason.
I'm not the right person to ask about a lot of that kind of thing, because I never thought about it.
Why?
All I cared about was writing a clever song.
Like after Amazing and Thank You, there seemed to be this trajectory developing. Like they were going to play progressively bigger shows and be a really big band.
This is perfect. Like these guys are the trajectory is nothing but up.
Especially with Lee having that kind of quintessential rock star ethos.
I was brought on to Tooth and Nail to do PR. I didn't know anything about them really. There was one bad photo we had of them. Listen, none of us fully realized what we were dealing with until that summer at Cornerstone, when we all saw them live for the first time.
And we stopped and we stood in the colonnade for a while. Everything was okay. For a while, everything was okay.
The two bands that were traveling together were Piltdown Man, which was the band that I was in at the time, and Luxury.
We did shows together pretty regularly, I suppose. To join one was almost like joining both bands. We went up to Illinois so that both bands could play at Cornerstone. We had two vehicles. Part of the caravan was at least a couple of wives.
Yeah, it was just a great road trip. I mean, it was just funny. We listened to music. Everybody laughed and joked. I mean, there was just this exciting, this air of anticipation. It was going to be a festival. You guys are going to play.
So it was stressful getting up to Cornerstone to begin with because young band, young manager, nobody had any money.
Oh, I didn't tell you this. To recoup, we need to make about $13,000. The guy that brought the box of posters over there said they should be $5. Hey. Yeah, so I went, and I put a fist in his gut.
A bunch of us had piled into one of the dorm rooms. Were interrupted during the night repeatedly by someone trying to kick most of the people out of the room because we had too many people in the room.
They were the hot ticket. The show's packed, full of excited young folks.
Whoever was managing the stage, he's yelling at us to get on stage.
He kept wanting us to turn down, and that's like the worst thing you could ask us to do. We would just be belligerent and turn it up.
If you make us angry, you can usually tell.
Can the music be turned off, please?
Thank you. This is a band called Luxury, and they're gonna play a couple songs for you.
I was right in front of Lee, totally enamored, totally blown away. The moves that boy had.
It was a good crowd, very energetic. No one has seen us play live before.
They were playing South, and at some point in the song, Jamie was like overwhelmed by the rock, just went completely bonkers. And at that point, the train did in fact come off the rails. That was volatile, you know, it's what rock and roll should be. It gave those kids something to think about.
I forgot about that.
And I remember Jamie's sister-in-law asking, who pissed you guys off? When we're very angry like that, I think we tend to play quite well.
It was all good fun.
When you say enough, really enough.
We were all totally exhilarated to go home and make it happen for that band. It was like our crown jewel. They had the songs, the look, the attitude. They had everything. You know, we had our heads raised high knowing that we had that band.
Yeah, it was fun till we got back on the road.
People tell me that the Luxury show at Cornerstone that year was absolutely epic. I have no recollection.
Coming off that high, we got to drive back to Georgia from Illinois, and one day I was in the car following the van with Matt and Matt's wife, Ruth. All of our equipment were in the van, and then I think 4 of us in the car.
So you've got 2 lanes going this way and 2 lanes coming back this way with a big grassy median.
Our manager at the time, Reed, was driving.
I remember took my seatbelt off and flipped over the seat. And so my head was down on the floor of the van and my legs were up.
I'm looking over at him. My left hand pulled down the steering wheel.
For a second, I could tell the van was not on the highway because it made a kind of, you know.
Ordinarily, I would just be easing back up onto the road. I didn't do that because there was a sign coming up.
So we're kind of watching this happen.
It cut toward the middle of the highway, and then it jerked quickly back to the left, like overcompensating. We watch it go down into this grassy median.
We were all saying it like, no, not the median. Like, don't flip, don't flip.
And when it got to the bottom of that,
you see the van turn
so that it's heading backwards, and that's when it starts flipping over. And I looked up and I saw this van. I said, "Is that us?"
Jamie said, we're gonna start flipping now. And sure enough, the van started tumbling down the highway. How flimsy we are. We don't stand a chance compared to the machinery we've made. I was just kind of flopping around like a shirt in a dryer, you know, as it was tumbling down the road.
And it was just a lot of muffled thumping and bumping.
The windows smash, and when it comes back up, it flips Gabe, the singer of Piltdown Man, out the window, easily 30 feet in the air.
What seemed like just an eternity, just kind of like he was asleep and he was just floating in the air.
I flew up in the air and landed in the median, flat on my back.
Eventually it came to rest, and I was standing on the ground through the broken van window. A few seconds later, a jar of mayonnaise shattered on my leg.
You open your eyes and it's just a disaster scene, broken windows and people murmuring and whimpering.
You could hear the van making this hissing noise, and I looked up and saw Reed Davis's head sideways, like it was kind of twisted and there's blood all over him.
I don't think I've ever experienced pain like that before.
But once I was out of the van, I saw Gabe laying in the median of the highway, staring straight into the air.
His eyes were open, and he had blood all over his face.
He looked like he was dead. He eventually started trying to snort air. I was screaming for somebody to help him.
I remember scrambling over to him and falling down on my knees, sitting over Gabe, and I can remember crying and begging God not to take my husband.
I ran to the van, expecting maybe everybody to be dead. Lee was under the van. His body was half out of the side window, which came to rest on his midsection.
Looking at my brother, I thought for sure he was dead. It was like time stopped. How will I react to this? You know, I mean, it's my brother.
We pushed the van up and pulled Lee out from under it.
Lifting on the van, I felt like my feet were gonna start slipping at any moment and just feeling like they can't slip, but it was outside of my control.
I assumed Lee was a goner at that point because he was laying there and he'd thrown up, but the blood had mingled with what had come out of him. I assumed it was his brain by his head. That was the last use I was to anybody in that situation. All that was left of him that I could make any sense of after the wreck was his hair. His hair was still perfect. The rest of him looked like an upturned pizza. It was like, that's how I knew where he was. Like, oh, is he somewhere around that hairdo?
It just didn't seem real because, you know, being in the car behind the van, we were fine. And then here's our friends, like, what just happened? And before we knew it, you know, the ambulance was there.
And they started cutting Lee's clothes off, and I could see that his hip was just all compressed and it wasn't right, and the bones were sticking out in weird places.
I was so upset at that moment.
And, you know,
Powerless
his face looked all banged up, and
I had to, like, really suspend.
1:40 p.m. on July 2nd, 1995. We survived a major auto accident.
The thing I recall most is being able to go in and see Lee and them telling me, this is serious. I mean, he's in critical condition, and we don't know if he's gonna make it. I had to assess it because I needed to call Amy, Lee's wife. And to this day, I mean, this is probably one of the hardest phone calls I've ever made.
Chris said, there's been an accident. And so I threw the phone. And I told Katie, I said, I can't talk to him. I just knew something was wrong. Because I knew if Chris was calling me, things were, you know, he was always one to break the bad news to me. Katie picked the phone up, and he was telling her that Lee was hurt really badly, and they didn't know if he was going to be okay.
I tend to be a pessimist, and I kind of wait for bad things to happen. I just never really thought it would happen.
Right before I left to get on the airplane, the nurse told me, we're going to let you talk to him. He's going to surgery, and he may not make it. So you need to, you know, be able to say goodbye because we don't know what's wrong. Didn't know until I got off the plane if he was okay.
I hear them bring Lee in, I call out to him, and then I hear them go to work on him. And he's just in agony. He's just in pain. It was just a horrible, horrible thing.
Time
remember yelling a lot. It's a kind of unique pain that I never experienced before. Almost immediately it began cutting into my sides, inserting chest tubes. You could hear the crunch of the tube going through your chest wall. I had 2 people holding my arms and then 2 other people putting in the chest tubes. They had to open me up and found that my bladder had burst, my urethra had been severed, and then a lot of broken things. So my pelvis had been flattened, basically, been laid out and broken in 4 places. Broken ribs, broken clavicle, cuts and bruises. 2 punctured lungs.
Glenn calls and says, there's been an accident. They think that I might have broken my nag.
Hello, this is Glenn back from Luxury. I'm here in some insane hospital in the middle of nowhere.
We didn't know what we were walking into.
Hello, and there's my beautiful wife. Hello. Hi.
Glenn broke his neck. Our manager, Reed, he broke his neck. And then Gabe broke his neck as well.
We were all just fucking sad. They were just bursting at that time.
Did you hear that Luxury was in a car wreck and Lee almost died? And I was like...
I woke up alone in the room, realized something really bad had happened, and just started wiggling fingers and toes. I didn't talk about this with anyone, about how I felt. There was really just kind of a euphoria for a few days. I was just very happy to be alive. No one could understand what we had gone through, and we could all just laugh together. It was honestly kind of a cool time, as strange as that may sound. At the time, I certainly thought that the others felt the same way. Maybe that was also just a side effect of morphine. But it seemed real cool to me.
They had cut off my favorite jeans, and I remember thinking, you know, you don't get those things back. Those are hard to replace.
All the people joking around the whole time, it helped normalize things a lot, you know, when it was anything but, because everybody's real funny. That whole crew was.
You're lucky you didn't get staples in your head. I got staples in my head.
You almost hit the stitches in my finger.
Yeah, he looks pretty lucky right about now.
Is my hair matted?
I feel like I would be laughing and fine 1 minute, and then 10 minutes later, you know, I'd be in a corner in a heap, just sobbing my eyes out and embarrassing myself.
Lee didn't seem as happy as I was.
He didn't look good, but he made not looking good look good. If there's any way to work looking all messed up, Lee could work it. Gabe, on the other hand, looked like a space alien. He looked like an experiment.
Hi, I'm Chris Sophocles, king of the meat people.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to see you again. Gabe. I've seen you since the wedding. Come here, little girl. We're gonna show you the screws.
Watching Gabe and Lee be so doped up on morphine that they had no clue who or what they were.
I remember calling Lee. He asked me if my nipples hurt, and I told him no, because all of Florida was with me.
The first couple of months, I was totally helpless. I couldn't walk. I stopped eating. I only weighed about 130 pounds to begin with, and I lost about 25 pounds. I had a walker for a few months, and then I had a cane for a little bit. Probably didn't need the cane very much. It was more for show, I think.
A good chunk of us could have or maybe should have been dead. The wreck itself was a horror show. The aftermath was a horror show. Everyone had whatever they were going through mentally, but for me it was rough because I was driving.
It had certain psychological impacts on me, make me far more aware of how easily we can be wiped out.
I mean, I'm still affected by it.
Yeah, he's never been the same since.
Whenever I see, like, even a van that looks like that, like, it just, that image haunts me.
You hear, like, Glenn talk about it, and it's very emotionally troubling for him.
Yeah.
Or my wife. I'm not a very sensitive person. It wasn't emotionally difficult, really. I don't know if that's totally true.
It was one of the first instances where I was involved in something that wasn't just like, oh, call our parents and let them take care of it. It was like, oh, we had to kind of act like adults.
I don't think I was destroyed by having to go through it. I never questioned God. I never questioned, why me. It was purely physical.
This is the kind of thing that, it could go either way. It could have really destroyed someone's faith and just turned kind of very bitter and resentful, and it didn't.
I guess it does make you reassess, what am I doing and is it worth it?
They were gaining notoriety, fame, whatever, and everything just ground to a halt.
And I just feared that it would be such a devastating crash that music would stop.
I really thought the band would probably be done.
It was over, and we knew it.
It never crossed my mind, anything about the impact of the band, but so it didn't matter. I was just like, will my best friend be a widow at 22? Will there be mobility and walking happening? It was more just personal to me.
So what do you expect from life? So what do you expect from life?
I think what I realized is I love playing music in this band, but if we didn't play anymore, I'm fine with that. I'm glad Lee's alive.
Music wasn't exactly #1 priority.
Lee's always been a fairly serious person, and he became even more serious. I think it kind of forced him to maybe deal with some of that through his art. So, how is God good in the midst of this tragedy? How do I struggle through that? What does this do to my faith?
About 5 months ago, I was laying underneath a van and thinking about all of you. No, I really wasn't thinking about much, I want to say thank you. We really do appreciate all the thoughts and concerns and prayers, about everything we've gone through. It's been, it's been hell, basically.
Full Moon Studio. Let me take you in.
I'm one of the people who reps really, really hard for latest and greatest. This is the logical next step. This is where this band was supposed to go.
I think that second album is really a tribute to that whole time. It just makes me thankful for life and for these friends.
Transfer me to the nearest starving.
I remember liking especially the title track. It has that refrain of "I'm the greatest, I'm the greatest." You know, the world should know that by now. That you know, we're the greatest.
I took that record as the document of a band who walked away from something very scary and had a new appreciation for what they almost lost.
Whereas the first record was all about attitude and posture, the second one became much more serious. The smiles kind of fell away a little bit.
For me, it feels intensely personal. Songs like I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, whether or not they were about this event, to me, they had to be, because they were part of understanding it.
I remember hearing I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings live, and as I remembered, it was just Lee. My memory, he's sitting in a wheelchair, which is probably...
It was the day after he was healed out of the hospital. So pretty good.
I remember he's sitting in the median.
So Tooth and Nail, after the second record came out, I think the relationship just kind of soured. I think it was mutual. We're not going to give them what they want as far as touring, and we're not getting kind of promotion that we probably would like to have seen.
Tooth and Nail had found their groove, right? And Luxury wasn't a part of that. They weren't a part of the sort of punk pop thing.
I mean, they sold so little in the Christian market.
The second record definitely did not receive the kind of marketing support that the first one did. So predictably, it did worse.
Even to this day, I have no idea how many records we sold for the first or second record.
There's a luxury of the first two Tooth and Nail records that is a live band. The music is organized that way. And then they started making produced recordings.
We had the opportunity to sign with Bulletproof Records and to record another album with Matt Goldman, who was in the band Piltdown Man.
It was like the second thing I ever did.
There began to be a lot more variation in song structure, in style of engineering.
I owned a record label, and we released 60 records, and this was the best thing we ever put out. It's like gold to me. Yeah.
Whereas the first two records, they're socially aggressive. He's singing about transvestites, and he's singing about prostitutes and things like that, and, you know, trying to instigate a feeling. And in the third record, he's kind of too wrapped up in his own thing to worry about making someone else feel something. So you end up getting this really warm, texture-heavy exploration of kind of an interior, which I guess was that's the cover. It's an interior. There's not a lot of scandal. The scandal is how kind of transparent he is, which at the time was really, really important to me. His audience wasn't necessarily the people at the foot of the stage. It was more of this, like, talking with the other, you know, talking with eternity or something.
The songs were just slamming, and there's like a really raw brassiness to the recording quality. To Conquer and Destroy, I loved that song. Here I am. Yeah.
No fame, no fortune, only permanent. No fame is less to be loved.
just like haunting.
I don't get to give up everything to the record because I don't trust the singer. For some reason, I trusted Lee. There seemed to be something there.
I'd probably murder him if I thought it would give me his voice in some way.
Several of my friends that I have now, we talk about that record as if it was this private discovery.
Store after store refused to stock it. The very first song on this record is full of lyrical problems for a Christian audience. Fat girls, retards, men wearing G-strings, and well-read Christians who are double-crossed whores. All within the space of like one verse.
When the third album came out, anytime we were playing, we really wanted to fill out our sound. Having Matt on board and asking him to play, I think, well, duh, why didn't we do this before now?
Honestly, Lee wanted to be able to prance around on stage freely without having to play guitar.
It wasn't somebody from the outside coming in that we had to kind of school in something. I think Matt's extensive musical experience, I think has just been helpful.
He's a fantastic guitar player, and I always thought a great stage presence. You could feel the energy off of what he was doing. It fit perfectly.
So much more than the shallow man.
Like at some point,
Glenn started having the seizures.
I can remember one show we played where he only could do about half the set, and then he had a seizure.
I mean, I think it's like health was just so compromised from then forward.
When I was about 12 years old, my mom comes to me and says, I'm leaving. I'm going to Fort Lauderdale. I'm taking your younger brother. Like, why are you doing this? Apparently, there had been some abuse from my stepfather. Like, she would wake up and he would be hitting her. And I'm given the choice at 12 years old as to where I'm going to live. Whether I was going to stay in Michigan with my stepfather, the spousal abuser, or go with my mom. The thing is, by that point, I had already been through so many school systems, and I had finally made some friends, and I didn't want to start over again. And so I decided to stay. But then my stepfather went crazy. I mean, literally. He started wearing trash bags on his head, was telling me that our house was sinking. My mom came and got me, took me down to Florida. My mom and I had gone to do laundry. We had gotten in an argument about something stupid. We pull in, I get out, and she says, leave the door open, I'm gonna get out that side. Which there was no reason for her to get out that side. But the gun was in that glove compartment. She said she was going for a walk. So she didn't show up. I'm told to get on my bike, go around, see if I could find her. And then police show up. There was like our little row of apartments, and then on the other side, a little picnic table behind the seafood place. And that's where she was. That's where they found her. And in May, on Mother's Day, my mom committed suicide. Probably not more than 20 yards behind our apartment where we lived. I was 13. My grandmother had told me not to tell anyone that she had committed suicide because it was just, kind of a black mark on the family, so to speak. Oh, I'm screwed up for life. I mean, literally. I hate to even say this, but I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome. I have what are called psychogenic seizures that are induced by stress and anxiety, and that comes from years of not ever having grieved at all with anyone. And I would say also from the accident. You just kind of move forward because that's what you do when you've lived a life where it's just been sort of a series of bizarre things. I didn't know the questions to ask.
It's hard to change. And when we were going to be famous, we were going to try to make money and be good artists, and then reality hits and you realize you can die. And not only does the art change, but suddenly if you're going to be authentic, you're going to follow through with the things that are a part of your life.
You know, I was actually kind of starting to resent the band a little bit. Put any career goals on hold in order to, you know, have a job that was flexible for the band. We had started having kids. You know, I was painting houses for a living. Am I going to be doing this when I'm, you know, 60?
My brother and Chris at the time are actively thinking more and more internally about their spiritual life.
Never stopped believing, just generally speaking, still Christian, but the church itself I found irrelevant, really. When I was exposed to Orthodoxy, very quickly it gave me a right framework for understanding how to worship God.
I had already become an Orthodox Christian at the time, and so it just seemed like some doors really started opening up to be able to go to seminary.
We had been together all the time, and we'd been in this little tiny town, and we'd been forged into this unit, you might say, and then suddenly, like, Glenn moves away, and then my brother moves away, and Chris made the decision to go to seminary to discern if he had a calling to the priesthood. I thought it was kind of crazy at the time. I wasn't there yet, but that's where I was going.
We ended up moving to Kansas City, and I went to work for a bank, selling loans to people, and being under pressure from middle management. It was very depressing. And I was thinking about Chris, who was at seminary in New York, and Glenn, who was working with mentally disabled people in North Carolina, and Jamie, who was at the time becoming Orthodox, wrestling with all of that.
I mean, becoming Orthodox, for one thing, for me was life-shattering and painful.
From that point on, everything changed. You know, they weren't about let's be rock stars anymore.
And yet, they kept putting out records. I don't know, I think the best art comes out of these conditions of things, life pulling you in these different directions.
The earlier Luxury, there was a little more spit in the lyrics, and the humor and satire, as time went on, that got more layered and subtle and deep. Like, there were things that were being said that you didn't feel the spit, but it was more like a stake in your soul. Just like, oh.
What is there to say now anyway? Conversation, okay.
The first record that I made with Luxury as a member of the band was Health and Sport. And that was made in a hot attic in downtown Toccoa, Georgia.
The lights are too bright to make love to you.
Well, my expectation was that, well, nobody's gonna listen to the record anyway. So it's like, I can do whatever I want. I'm not trying to appeal to anybody.
Social to interior. I mean, a lot of bands make this progression. And they go from like wanting to impress a certain local group to then wanting to impress a slightly larger group. And then eventually that group gets large enough in their minds that everything breaks and they realize, oh my goodness, the only person I can impress is myself. And so it all snaps back. And then you get these intensely experimental records like Kid A or Homogenic.
They kind of didn't become a different band, but definitely took on a different sonic than what they started with.
Self-titled and the Health and Sport, like, I love those albums.
Right out of the gate on Health and Sport, you can hear that Lee's voice is so beautiful and assured in a way that it wasn't in the past.
I should pull the curtains closed.
It sounds so much more determined and focused and confident in who they are and what kind of songs they're supposed to be writing.
Jamie produced it. It was bits and pieces that he cobbled together into a remarkable record, and one that didn't get the kind of attention that it probably deserved.
Strange flowers. Strangers have made love there.
Each progressive record, you can tell like there's a maturity and a growth and a cohesiveness as a band, which the first record does not have. It's a jumble of influences like all slammed together, and it's awesome, but it's not as thought through. I mean, I imagine there's way more time spent on the later records.
The secret weapon for us is really just bringing the songs back and forth. He gives them back to us, we destroy them, we give them back to him, he straightens them out, and there we go.
His songwriting abilities, who knew that was there? I never imagined.
Just sleep, just sleep. This is no holocaust. It's so what you
Looking back on it, I don't think we had a chance. Because we didn't fit neatly into the parameters that were set up at the time.
Why didn't luxury make it? Why didn't somebody see in them and hear in them what we see in them and hear in them right now? Did the Christians kill them? Was it self-sabotage? What do you say about a band that has a history of not promoting itself?
If you have some kind of aura about you of being even remotely associated with a Christian label, automatically you get dismissed.
It sloughs off a potential audience immediately.
They couldn't seem to get escape velocity to get out of that world.
I would have loved to see them on Kill Rock Stars or Discord. They would have been as big as Fugazi or as big as Sleater Kinney, for sure.
I mean, I identify as an atheist, but it makes me very angry to think that there's still that kind of closed-mindedness, even on this side of the fence, that it's like, well, this is a Christian band, so it can't be any good. And, you know, they don't realize that's just as narrow-minded.
It is easier to stay out than it is to get out. To never have played at Cornerstone might have been better. For some reason, we all had a glimmer of hope at the time that there was a way. They say the same thing about actresses. They say, don't start with porn and then think you're going to become a real actress.
You were in a Christian band, but they rejected you.
I'm always surprised when people like our music, and I don't believe it. I mean, I don't believe them.
The band story is really interesting. I would imagine that their individual stories are far more interesting than the band itself.
Just the whole idea that 3 of these guys went on to become clergy. It's one of the strangest things that I can imagine.
The fact that they're all 3 Orthodox priests is... You can't call it a coincidence.
I can only imagine that they're the only rock band with a 3/5 majority of in the priesthood.
As bizarre as the Orthodox priesthood thing has been presented, you see these images of those dudes with the, you know, the incense. Oh, that is honestly not very surprising to me. That just seems like there's that trippy band doing trippy stuff again. I don't know what they're... Mysterious band doing mysterious shit. I don't know where it comes from. That's so much more committed to your beliefs than a lot of the bands or the kids ever really were.
Seeing pictures of them, they still look like kick-ass dudes. It's a terrible, I can't even speak good English right now.
Father Chris was the first person I knew who became Orthodox. I had been in the Balkans during the war, and that was the only exposure I had had in my life to Orthodoxy, which I saw with my own eyes, priests pouring holy water onto artillery shells and stuff like that. So I thought, this is crazy. Like, why would you voluntarily convert to whatever that religion is?
Going to that school, you had all of these professors, all of whom you equally respected, all saying there's absolute truth, and you know, we have the scripture, and sola scriptura, and then you had just as many different interpretations as there were professors. Started asking the questions, well, then what is our criteria for truth? Was there a time in the history of the church where there was at least some kind of common understanding of absolute truth? So that led a group of us to then start studying some of the disciples of the disciples, the early church fathers, and well, how did the early church do worship? Being a musician, that constant struggle between the sacred and the secular, or whatever you want to call it. You know, there was a time in the history of the church where there weren't these dichotomies.
Orthodoxy is a communion of churches that developed in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, the western part developing into what would be known as Catholicism. Orthodoxy, compared to Christianity as it's experienced by most people in the West, has a really strong emphasis on prayer and contemplation. It has not developed the sort of hierarchy that Roman Catholicism has and not stripped the things that Protestantism has.
The belief within Orthodoxy is that in these early Christian centuries that were so formative for the church's theological self-understanding, you had truth being arrived at by the fathers and by the councils, and all of that was already being expressed in worship that's very experiential, very sensory. There's music, there's icons that you kiss, there's architecture that you experience, there's incense that you smell. So all of this is of a piece, and together somehow constitutes the particularity of Orthodoxy.
With Father Chris, I always had a hunch that he'd go on to be a priest. Now, Jamie and Lee, I didn't see that coming.
When I became Orthodox back in '94, I think almost immediately the thought was, this is a life-changing event. I had never really considered the church as an occupation, but my dad was a minister, so I knew kind of what it looked like. I was made a priest, and a priest has a certain function within the Orthodox Church, which is sacramental. Eventually, a priest should become a pastor, but that takes time. Part of our tradition is the sacrament of confession. That will make you a pastor pretty quickly because you're hearing people's stuff. Not just their sins, but their troubles and their passions. And then you're trying to show them the way to live. And so you got to grow into that. That takes some maturity. My father was a pastor. The priestly stuff is much easier than the pastoral stuff.
I was assigned here to take over as priest in charge at St. James Orthodox Mission in Beaufort. This is the room where I work on both music and church stuff, so it's a weird combination of rock band and orthodoxy. Over here you can see my vestments, but then of course right next to them is the requisite Fender bandmaster. I went to church one Wednesday night, and I was watching Father Jacob up there doing the prayers, and I thought, I could do that. That's the words that went through my mind. I could do that. And then all of a sudden, I realized that I had just become willing to do something that I'd refused to do for years. I immediately started thinking, what would it take to become a priest? It was obvious that there was some calling there.
I was nervous about learning how to do it well. It's so complicated. There's so many parts and movements. It's not about you at all, but you hope that you will offer your absolute best to God. And that's where it's similar to performing live.
Going to unload at a gig is not very much different than going to our little mission where we're renting a room and we have to set up every week, piece after piece, and we have a church set up suddenly. I mean, it's very much like being in the band and playing a show.
Before I went to seminary, if someone asked me what I did, I finally became convinced that I needed to say, I'm a musician. And that was who I was, even though if I built furniture in the day to pay for those things, my real vocation was being a musician. I became a priest, and ultimately that's sort of superseded that. It doesn't erase it, and so every now and then a song comes to mind, so you want to write.
Are you good at it?
Of course. No, who knows? But that's the other thing about priesthood is that it's not about whether you're good or it's actually the more you see your own failures, the more that there's opportunity for something good to come of it. I hope to be good at it. hope to be just like Father Chris someday.
I'm there to bring Christ to people, not myself. I have to be aware of that. You know, am I bringing myself or am I bringing Christ? Yeah, so that's hard. What does a priest do? A priest is one who offers the oblation up, who offers something up that then gets returned to us as something life-giving. We don't take wheat and grapes, we take bread and wine, the work of man's hands, and that's what's lifted up unto Christ, and that's what gets returned to us as Christ himself, as something life-giving. As I was thinking about art, music, just everyday life, it's like, okay, that means something. It answered a lot of questions that I had about, you know, oh, if you're playing in a band, are you a Christian band or not a Christian band? It almost just takes that whole argument and just places it in a completely new context. The question isn't, are you a Christian band or not, or are you a Christian artist or a Christian lawyer? It's just, are you by nature of your just life vocation a priest of creation who offers up the talents, the vocation, the relationships, everything that is your matter, you know, your stuff of life, and are you taking it and offering it up? And then if you're offering it up, then are you receiving it as something life-giving? You know, back to my punk rock days, somehow that was a yearning that I think has been fulfilled ultimately in the vocation I'm in now. You know, to spend my life doing that and helping people do that in the midst of incredible difficulty and sorrow, to point them towards Christ, that yes, you know, our life has meaning. I love it. There has been no greater joy in my life than standing at that holy altar, leading the people in those prayers, because that is the center of the universe. The cross stands and the world revolves.
Hell said he was embittered. It was embittered, for it was mocked. It was embittered, for it was slain. It was embittered, for it was overthrown. It took a body and met God face to face. Christ is risen, and the angels rejoice. Christ is risen, and life reigns. Amen. Christ is risen. Indeed is risen.
I think there were appealing aspects of it artistically. Sort of intellectual problems seem to be solved fairly easily, just, you know, looking at the history and that kind of stuff. But that's not really what it's about. That's certainly not ultimately why I became Orthodox. The moment of decision for me was real quick. It was the palpable realization that God was actively loving me in this little parish through these people. That was all. So it was like, oh, what am I afraid of? What is there to be afraid of? There's nothing to be afraid of. So it was real easy. I'm uncertain as to how it's going to go.
I would have just never imagined it, really. I was so focused on, you know, church life, and so I was very, you know, really excited. I mean, the chance to get together with really my closest friends, make music together. You know, who wouldn't want to do that?
I don't know what everyone has in terms of what their concept is of the record.
It's gonna be, you know, I mean, it's gonna be luxury. Something new kind of happens every time we get together, and we all walk away at least a little disgruntled with what we did, and that's exactly how it works.
We get together in a room, we smash out some of the old songs, and it was horrible.
But I forget how hard it is to make records. I forget how hard it is to just get through that to the end product. It can be a an ugly process, but it's amazing when it all comes together.
Once we fleshed out 2 or 3 songs, it was like just riding a bike or just picking up where we left off.
Change your life.
If the goal is to justify your existence as a rock band, pay attention to us. That can't really be the motivation of a priest, that's just not, you've given that up.
It's sort of the role of youth to kind of provoke and do stupid things. Now I'm a priest and I have responsibility for my family and my community. You grow up, mature, you can still provoke, not just to simply poke at something. Now I'm more interested in looking at things in a more permanent sort of way.
Kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And of his beloved Son and the Spirit in the form of a dove.
Older priests have said to a lot of us younger priests, it's very important for you as part of your spiritual life to have some type of hobby or something that you do that's your own, that's creative, that will help you in your ministry. And I think it has. I think it just keeps me integrated. I'm Father Christopher, but I'm also Chris the bass player.
I wouldn't hear the record and go, well, this record is obviously made by guys that are priests. I don't even know what that means, actually.
The nostalgist in me loves the first Luxury record. But if I'm being honest, Trophies is their best record.
We could dance all day, nowhere to go, no reason to stay. There were times we could dance all day. The warm nights, the flash of lights, we stood along the causeway and watched the shores decay. Yeah, there were times we could dance all day. I'm going to fall in love with you. I'm going to fall.
What I know of Orthodox priests, they don't seem to be the sort of folks who'd be in a band. Just you expect a certain kind of person to be a priest, I think is the biggest thing, and maybe we're wrong about those kinds of people who are priests.
Remember when we talked this way?
It does not surprise me that they continue making music. The seamless integration of the two with Luxury validates the integrity that I've always assigned to them.
Talk all day. The consequence of a cheap rent. We lie in your room all day and watch the walls decay. And there were times we could talk all day.
They don't sing like a band who has all the answers, but they sing like a band who's trying to find them. That, to me, carries a tremendous weight.
And as an Orthodox person, yeah, man, we have rock and roll priests, dude. Or does the Catholic Church have that? They probably do somewhere, I don't know.
Is Luxury a Christian band?
It's just, how can you say no?
we start from.
I'm finally robed in light. Sadness and sorrow turning right. And I found my treasures, not in the pleasures when I am finally robed in light. To be so passionless, to be so far from the ugliness that I have always our hearts are not broken at all. Our hearts are not broken at all. It's in the hangman, the empress, and then the tower. But our hearts are not broken at all. The party was fun for a while. The party was fun for a while. I couldn't answer your questions about God, but the party was fun for a while. Don't believe what you read, and don't believe in anything you can't see. Measure life from the balcony. But I want to feel something. The city looks so